In the summer of 1886, a killing sandstorm rolled across the Arizona territory with a force that turned daylight into darkness. Rancher Caleb Morgan had seen dust storms before, but never one that swallowed the horizon so quickly. He was riding home from a distant water station when the wind began screaming across the desert. His horse fought every step, and the air filled with sand that stung his face like thrown gravel. Caleb was about to turn back when he saw something moving through the brown wall ahead. At first, he thought it was a wounded coyote. Then the figure stumbled again, and he realized it was a woman. She was trying to walk against the storm, one arm wrapped around something beneath her torn blanket. Caleb urged his horse forward, lowered his head, and rode directly into the darkness. He found her nearly collapsing beside a dry wash. She was an Apache woman, exhausted, frightened, and covered in dust. Her name was Naya. When Caleb reached for her, she raised a small knife, warning him to stay back. But the storm was growing worse by the second, and she could barely remain standing. Caleb slowly removed his coat, placed it around her shoulders, and said, "I'm not here to hurt you. If you stay out here, the desert will." Naya watched him carefully, and she looked toward the bundle in her arms. Caleb expected to see food or supplies. Instead, a tiny sound came from beneath the blanket. A baby. The child was barely breathing. Caleb immediately understood why Naya had risked the storm. She had not been running for herself. She had been carrying the infant away from danger. Without asking another question, Caleb lifted Naya onto his horse and carefully secured the baby against her chest. Then he turned his horse toward his ranch. The journey back was brutal. The storm erased every trail, every fence line, and every familiar landmark. Caleb relied on memory and the direction of the wind. Twice, his horse nearly lost its footing. Naya held the baby close, whispering softly whenever the child stirred. Caleb could not understand her words, but he understood the fear in her voice. After nearly 2 hours, the storm began to weaken. Caleb finally saw the outline of his ranch house in the distance. He had never been so relieved to see a roof. Inside, he built a fire and gave Naya warm water. The baby was weak but alive. Caleb had no doctor nearby, yet he knew enough to keep the child warm and fed. Naya refused to leave the infant's side. She watched Caleb with suspicion, as if expecting him to demand something in return. He never did. By morning, the storm had passed. The land looked completely changed. Fences had disappeared beneath drifts of sand, and several trees had been torn from the ground. Caleb stepped outside and saw horse tracks leading toward the northern ridge. Someone had followed them. Naya saw them too. Her expression changed instantly. She grabbed Caleb's arm and pointed toward the horizon. "They come," she said quietly. Caleb reached for his rifle. "Who?" Naya's eyes filled with fear. "Men who want the child." Before Caleb could ask more, distant riders appeared through the morning haze. There were 6 of them. They wore rough coats and carried weapons. They did not ride like travelers. They moved like men who believed the land belonged to them. Caleb told Naya to stay inside, but she shook her head. "No," she said. "They know me." The riders stopped outside the ranch. Their leader called out, demanding the Apache woman and the child. He claimed Naya had stolen something valuable from a trading camp. Caleb stepped onto the porch. "She's under my protection." The leader laughed. "You don't know what you're protecting." Caleb looked back at Naya. She was standing near the doorway, holding the baby. Her face was tired, but her eyes were steady. The leader then revealed the truth. The child was not just any baby. The infant belonged to a respected Apache family, and several powerful men wanted the child because the baby's survival could unite rival groups that had been divided for years. Naya had escaped with the infant after witnessing a betrayal. She had carried the child across the desert because she knew those men would use the baby to control others. Caleb realized the storm had not been an accident. Naya had chosen the most dangerous path because it was the only one her enemies would not expect. The riders demanded that Caleb hand her over. He refused. The first shot struck the wooden fence. Caleb moved Naya and the baby behind the house. He did not want to fight, but the riders had already made their choice. For hours, The ranch became a place of tension and danger. Caleb knew the land better than the men outside. Naya knew something even more valuable: their intentions. Together, they survived the attack. When the riders finally retreated, they left behind one wounded man. Caleb expected Naya to demand revenge. Instead, she approached the stranger and asked him why he had followed them. The man eventually confessed that the leader had lied to the others. The baby was not wanted for power alone. The leader intended to use the child as leverage against an entire Apache community. Naya looked at Caleb. "We must go," she said. Caleb understood that protecting them at the ranch would never be enough. So he saddled his horse and rode with Naya into the desert. For 3 days, they traveled toward the mountains. Along the way, Caleb learned that Naya was not helpless, and she never wanted to be treated that way. She knew the desert, understood animal tracks, and could read the wind better than any rancher Caleb had ever met. More than once, she saved them from danger before he even realized it was near. On the 4th evening, they reached a hidden valley. Dozens of Apache riders emerged from the rocks. Caleb immediately raised his hands. Naya stepped forward. For a moment, no one moved. Then an older woman came toward Naya and took the baby into her arms. Tears filled her eyes. The child was safe. The people gathered around Naya, but she kept looking back at Caleb. The elder asked why a white rancher had risked his life for them. Naya answered simply, "Because he saw a person before he saw an enemy." The word stayed with Caleb. He had entered the Sandstorm believing he was rescuing a stranger. He had left it understanding that courage was not about defeating someone. Sometimes, courage meant crossing a deadly desert for someone who could never repay you. Weeks later, Caleb returned to his ranch. He expected the land to feel empty after everything that had happened. Instead, one morning, he found Naya standing near the corral. She had returned. Caleb stared at her. "Why?" Naya smiled faintly. "You saved my life," she said. "But I did not come back because I owe you." Caleb waited. "I came back because I choose to." For the first time in years, Caleb smiled. The sandstorm had destroyed fences, damaged his ranch, and changed the landscape forever. But it had also brought two people together who were never supposed to meet. And from that day forward, whenever dark clouds gathered over the Arizona desert, Caleb Morgan remembered the woman he had found walking into death, and the secret she carried that changed everything.